Hey everybody, how we doing today? Let's take a look at module number 5. First off, can you believe we're already halfway through the semester, right? Like that is crazy that we're already that far along. Let's take a look at module number 5. Module number 5 does two things. One, it gets us ready to do the final draft, right? Like we're going to turn in the final draft, that comparative analysis. The other thing that we're really going to be focusing on is this process of peer responding and revising. And so what we really want to be able to do is look at other people's work and be able to make some good, creative, constructive comments that helps that person improve their paper, makes their paper better. Now, I really like peer responding because it does give you as a writer a fresh set of eyes on your paper, right? Like you're always really proud of your work and you're really like, hey, I really like what I did. And you may say you don't like it, but you really do. And for someone else to come along and say, hey, here's what I see is wrong with this paper, that's tough. So it gives you that sense of, that gives you a sense of ownership, but it also allows you to let go of that paper a little bit to put some fresh eyes on it. I think also too, when those fresh eyes look at it, they're going to see things that you don't, right? Like you fill in the blank spaces, you know what you meant to say, you are the expert in that area. Someone else may not. And so that gives them the opportunity to give you some feedback on what a potential reader might be looking at, right? I think the other thing that peer review does is it allows you, the reader, to really look at things differently and say, hey, here's what worked. What about that worked? And can I do that in my own work? And boy, that didn't work. Okay. Why did it not work for me? Okay. That's something I want to avoid when I do my writing, right? So it really benefits both sides, the reader and the writer. And that is what we're going to be focusing on this module. Now, and again, we're going to also be looking at that process of revision. One of the things for the revision is this tutoring activity that we're going to do. Now, you have two options. Okay, you have two options to get to have somebody, a tutor, an expert, if you will, read your paper, right? So in the end, when you get ready to do your final draft, you're going to have, I'm going to make some comments. You're going to have two of your peers at least make comments, and then you're also going to have this tutor that's going to give you some feedback. So you're going to have a lot of feedback to work with to improve your paper for the end. You do have two options. We know this is an online class. We know that the purpose of this is for you to be able to work, in your own space. But you do have access to all the resources that on-campus students do. You still have access to all that. And one of them is the writing center at your local campus. So on each campus, there is a writing center. This is a place where you can go. You can hey, I need help with my paper. You give them the paper. They already know these assignments, which is really beneficial because they can just pick it up and go with it, right? Like they know exactly what you're supposed to be doing. That is really super helpful for you. It's a free service. Different campuses have different procedures for walk-in or making reservations or setting a time, right? But you do have access to all of those. So you just check with your local campus, the campus closest to you. Can I do this? Is something I can do? If you can't, you do have a second option, which is this tutor.com. So Ivy Tech pays for every Ivy Tech student to get 25 hours of free tutoring. And it's in any class, not just this class, right? You can use this for any of your classes. You can use it for any assignment in this class or any other class, right? Like you can use it for a lot of different things. This is a free online 24/7 text-based tutor service, right? So you would just log in, upload your paper, and then you would work with a tutor back and forth on what kinds of things that you see, what kinds of things might be helpful for you to improve. The thing I like about if you go to a local center, they're going to know the assignment, so they're going to have a really good idea of the process, right? I think tutor.com is really good because it's convenient. But I think also too, because they won't be as familiar with your assignment, that's going to force you to be able to verbalize, and being able to verbalize kind of says, okay, here's what I think I'm supposed to be doing. Here's the assignment sheet. Here's what I understand. Does that match what I did? Right. So both of them are options for you. You only do one, right? Like you only have to do one. You can do both. That's fine. But you only have to do one of those. Okay. When you do that, we want you to reflect on it afterwards, right? So you get your, you set up your time, or you create that time to do that. You go through the process, right? We want you to reflect on it afterwards, okay? We want you to reflect on it afterwards. And in that, it gives you, what you would do is just describe what the session was like. Like, what was it like? What did you think of it? What went well? And then, as you are working on that, think about some of these questions, right? Think about some of these questions. What worked, what didn't? Was it helpful, or was it not, and why, right? But we really want you to think back on your reflection. Now, if you are going to use the tutor.com, we would also like you to save the chat for that. There's an option for you to download at the end, so that we have record of that as well. Now, if you are not familiar with tutor.com, there are some steps here to use. It'll walk you through what to do. Okay. It'll walk you through what to do. And if you're wanting to do a local visit, there's also some steps for you to do, including a list of those, and then how to get a hold of the Writing Center and set up that time. Again, either one is fine, all right? But in the end, we want to see that kind of reflection, proof of your visit. What kinds of things did you discuss? And then that kind of reflection by you. Going back to peer review, we're talking about peer review. So you're going to have mine, you're going to have the tutor, and then you're going to have peers. And peers, people on your own level that are going to give you some feedback on it, right? And so we have some information about what is peer review, peer response. And I really like to point out this 4 Bs, right? Be tactful. Obviously, when you write something, you're very proud of it, right? Now you can say, oh, I hate it, it's awful, it sucks, whatever. Like, okay, you can say that, but that's probably not what you feel. And people really take pride in their work. So when you are responding to their work, when you're giving some feedback, when you're giving some criticism, just keep in mind using that neutral language, right? Because there are feelings involved here. Be honest, okay? Just because you read a paper doesn't, like, oh my God, it was amazing, I love it, blah, 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 right? Like, that's not the goal. The goal is to be honest. Hey, here's what I saw. Here's something that I think needed some work. It didn't work for me, right? This is the part that really worked and really did well. I love that, right? Be specific. Anytime you make a comment, like, if you say there's not enough depth, you don't explain this well enough. What are we talking about? Like the whole paper? No. So say in paragraph 3, or when you were talking about this article, when you made this comment, right? Like, be very specific. Go to a specific line, go to a specific paragraph, go to a specific topic, right? When you can tie those comments that you make to a specific piece, that also helps kind of smooth it, or makes it a little bit more neutral, because we're not making big, broad, kind of, statements. We're being like, hey, here's something I see here. Here's something I see here. And then be yourself. Obviously, you're not the instructor. You're not the person giving the grade. You are on the same side as the desk, So again, just keep that in mind, that this is what worked for me. This is what I like. This is what was useful for me. This is what made it harder for me to read, right? Like, be very honest, but be very yourself. We're going to go ahead and on last module, you posted your half draft on the discussion board. You submitted a copy to me, and then you had one on the discussion board. This week, we're going to go ahead and add in your peer reviews. What we want you to do then is we want you to go through and read several drafts. Don't just take the first 2 that you see, the first 3 that you see, right? Like, be mindful, because if you're not comfortable with the content, you're not comfortable with that might make it more difficult for you to read and give honest feedback, right? Now, that might work in your advantage in that, because I'm not familiar, I really need them to do a lot more extra work, right? And I made that. But make sure that you're picking papers that you can make commentary on. You have to select at least two. Again, the rule is the expectation is 2 feedbacks to get the full points. You definitely need more. And then you write your responses. Okay, write your responses using the questions that I'll show you here in just a second, right? Now, when you are doing this, right? When you are doing this, I want you to really keep in mind the goal is for you to help them improve their paper, right? I know that a lot of times, people look at discussion boards, like I said, check in the box. It's a thing I had to do, right? Like I go on, blah, 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 bam. But these things have like added meaning, right? Like the peer responses have added meaning because somebody's going to take your feedback and they're going to consider it when they finish theirs, when they revise theirs, right? So you want to make sure that what you are sharing is valuable, is meaningful, is helpful, and is actionable. What you're going to do is you're going to pick 3 of these 5 questions. You'll pick 3 of these 5 questions. They are very direct and they're very focused. And so they ask you to look at 3 particular parts or 3 particular aspects of their paper, right? And that helps you be specific and it helps kind of narrow it down a little bit and gives you the option to look at things that maybe you feel comfortable, speaking about, right? Like I can offer feedback in this. I can really look at this, okay? Again, please remember that your goal is to be actionable, that the feedback you give is complete, makes sense, but also is something that that person can take and go with. I really like this. This was easy to read. Well, what made it easy to read, right? What did you see that made it easy so that they could take that through the rest of the paper, right? So please make sure that you're keeping that in mind, okay? Let's take a look at the final draft of the comparative analysis. We talked about this before. There's a lot of information on there. The final draft is going to be somewhere around 1,000 words. You're going to use either MLA or APA style, and you're going to have at least 2 articles in there. Now, you're going to start with that real antithetical thesis statement. And what that means is that that thesis statement isn't going to be something like I compared blank and blank, right? Like it's looking for that piece that they share together or that really separates them, right? And including that, right? These are 2 apparently different texts, but on closer inspection, there's really something very similar behind them, right? Or what is something that they share, not just a topic, but maybe the approach, or maybe they used a particular style, right? Like maybe a particular appeal. You're going to have a really good, strong introduction that gets our attention and draws us in. Read those comments from your previous papers and the information, the tutorials, right? Questions can be okay if they are rhetorical and they make the reader think. Yes, no questions aren't very good because it's like, no, and you just quit reading, right? Be very clear about that. The introduction introduces the topic. It's going to bring in those 2 articles. So we're going to know those 2 articles. And then you're going to have that really strong thesis statement that really indicates what this paper is about. This is not going to be I am going to review, or I'm going to compare, or in this essay you will see, right? Like take those things out. We're not stating the obvious. We're keeping ourselves out of it. Body paragraphs that really break down these, that really summarize these 2 articles, and then really breaks down the comparison, right? So the first paragraph may be a summary of the first, then the next paragraph, a summary of the second, and then you get into that comparative analysis, right? Really show us how they are similar or how they're different. Now, remember that one of the big key components of this is the why. Why does it matter? What is significant about it? Think about this. McDonald's and Burger King. I think I gave you this example before. McDonald's and Burger King both serve cheeseburgers. That's the similarity. A difference, McDonald's fries theirs, Burger King grills theirs. It's on a open flame. Why does that matter? What is significant? Well, McDonald's is all about speed and consistency, and here, bam, go. But Burger King is about that personalization and that in the moment experience, right? Like they're going to cook it right now. So you're not going to get consistency at Burger King, but you will at McDonald's. Okay, so there's some things, right? Why does that matter? Well, because they're different processes, it's a different amount of time. There's a different expectation by the customer. There's also an expectation maybe of a price difference, right? Because McDonald's, because it's faster, it's going to be cheaper. Burger King's going to be a little bit more because it takes more time, right? So you think about that analysis piece. It's not just here's some similarities and here's some differences. Why does it matter? What is significant about this? What does it say about these two? The conclusion that kind of wraps things up, it doesn't have to be like, here's my thesis, here's my two main points, and here's the reason, but just tie this all up, bring it back around to us. Really think about how to present this in a very clear introduction, summary, analysis, wrap up, right? Like, give us this whole package. Remember, again, we are going to be citing and documenting this. I know that in our first paper, it was a little loose because everything came from one source. You are going to have to cite everything now, right? Like, so-and-so says in the article, and then the citation, right? Really be very mindful of that, because without that, it's going to be hard to see which is which. So make sure you're citing all of that information. Now, on that final draft, please go through and double check some things, right? Like as you're reviewing that and you're getting ready to submit that, look at those paragraphs, new idea, new paragraph, right? Look at the flow, look at the editing, okay? Make sure those things. No first or second person. Remember, we're going to get rid of those. I told you that before. We're not going to have that again. We're not going to have that in this and the next paper, right? So we're not going to have those first persons. That's just way too casual for this. Make sure you're in style, right? Like, don't lose points just because you missed a piece. There is some additional information for you to use about citations, some sample papers and things for you to look at. And then finally, you will be submitting your final draft right here. Now, again, I always recommend to look at the rubric, look at how will this be scored, right? What kinds of things can I really focus on to make sure I get my best product and my best grade, right? And so you look at how these things are, what is important, what's not. I mean, look at this, out of 150 points, 10 of that is the thesis statement. That's a one sentence that brings in 10 points, right? So you really want to make sure, like, I am really focused in on this. I'm really dialed in on this, right? When you look down here, here's the comparisons, right? Okay, 40 points for this, right? Like almost a third of the paper is about that, what's similar, what's different, and why does it matter? What is significant about that, right? Think about that. Style, 15 points. So again, look at the rubric and say, where are my points coming from? What's really important? What can I really focus in on to make sure that I get my best score? Hey guys, as always, make sure that you are, that if you need something, you're reaching out, right? Like if you need something, say, hey, here's where I'm at. Here's what I need. Here's what I need help with, right? Don't suffer in silence. The email is a great way to communicate, because I can do it asynchronously, but also I can see your paper, right? Like you can send the paper and say, hey, here's what I'm working on. Here's what I'm seeing. Can you take a look at this? Being very specific about those questions, but use that to your advantage. You have that ability. Go ahead and use them. But anyway, this module really brings in some pieces that we're going to use for the last one. So make sure that you're really dialed in on this. You're really focused on this. Use the sources, use the resources that are available to you, because you're going to get those again, not in the same format, but you do have access to all those things for the next one. So get comfortable, get used to using those, get familiar with them, because they're going to help you out as we continue. And as always, good luck, everybody.